break out the parade floats and whatever it is we do to celebrate now because me book. My first book has been out for more than a year and the paperback has just come out. So for all of you people who said, I'm going to wait for the paperback, your time has come. Cheers. This was gifted to me 6 years ago, 7 years ago by the very person who deletes all your comments. This video has been brought to you by the official drink of the last 18 months. Get it? 'Cause it's beer. Okay. So what are the most common things you get as an author is less about your own work so much as the process and how this can be applied to aspiring writers. Now that said, I don't know how helpful this will be because I definitely came in, deliberately. So with a large platform, because that's kind of, I don't want to say how it's done now, but it definitely doesn't hurt. The title of this video is also a little bit of false advertising. It would probably be more honest to say some things I wish I knew before I published me first book. And also some things I kind of suspected, but hoped weren't true, but totally were. I do kind of wish I could make these more like optimistic and inspirational than they were, because I feel like every time I do a writing video, like half the comments were like, whoa, I give up. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Man, it's hard. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass. When me mother yells at this, it's because she loves me. I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. Yeah. It's harder than you think it is. If you think it's going to be hard, it's harder than that. So I'm going to make a promise to myself that I am not going to try to be a total downer. Keyword tree. Okay. Number 1, getting published is harder now than it ever has been. I mean, it is what it is. So I think the paradox of self-publishing, becoming free and creating more access is that it also created more demand because a lot of people who read a lot of books, they tend to read like mystery and romance and erotica. And those genres do really well in self-publishing, and people who read those genres tend to read a lot. And then a lot of these people who spend a lot of time in like self-published stuff do tend sometimes to wade into traditionally published fiction. So why is it harder now than it's ever been? Well, believe it or not, demand is actually higher now. Less because of the print side, so much as the audiobook side, which is the fastest growing part of the publishing industry right now. And believe it or not, it is not a conflict of interest for me to use Audible as a sponsor. I was surprised about that too. So if there's more demand and self-publishing is kind of siphoning off people that maybe don't belong in traditional publishing, why is it harder now? Well, I can only kind of speculate, but I kind of suspect it's harder now for the same reason, getting a movie made, at least traditional Hollywood movie is harder now. Basically more and more resources go to fewer and fewer projects. I have seen a lot of people say that the mid-list is dying. I say I'm considered a mid-list author. Basically, publishers will kind of go all in on a few titles per year, usually by authors you've heard of, but sometimes by debuts, especially in, genre fiction, neofiction, and that kind of leaves fewer slots available. I think there's also just more supply. A lot more people are trying to get published, and really the hardest steps, the getting the agent and then actually getting published. Those 2 steps are again higher than they've ever been because there were fewer slots available and more people trying to get in. Number 2, getting published does not mean you've made it. I mean, it means you've been published, but like that doesn't guarantee you a career. And I feel like a lot of people have this misconception that If you get a book published once you re in the club and you re going to be fine. And it's not true. Oh, being an author is a constant struggle. And I know a very few authors where that's their only job. And the ones I don't know where, like, John Scalzi, literal millionaires who published like 500 books. What does happen is you might get published, you might have a lot of friends and contacts in the industry, but then for whatever reason, maybe tastes change. The genre you write in isn't like hot anymore. Ho ho, just because you sold a book before to a major publisher doesn't mean you'll all have an easy time from here on out. So no head. Number 3, if you want something done, you've got to do it yourself because your publisher want to do it for you. What I mean by this is if you need research, if you need a lot of editorial assistance, if you need inspiration, they re not going to do it for you. This really does depend on the editor. I've known of editors who, are a very hands-on and arguably take on more than they can handle both like emotionally and in terms of workload. And they spend a lot of time with their authors, just like brainstorming and workshopping. That was not me experience at all. I get like 2 emails a year with like, a list of 6 things to change. And then otherwise like, let me know when you re further along. And then that's it. My editor is just very hands-off. At first, I was kind of surprised by that because I guess I did expect to be like handheld, because it's like I'm a debut. I don't know what I'm doing. And they really like Turns out they don't really treat debuts any different than anybody else. And so the journey of me second book was very different from the first one because I sought a lot more outside help. I hired outside editors. I hired sensitivity readers. And I don't want to say like, that's a big regret I have with the first book, because I guess that was sort of a lesson you kind of have to learn. But I feel like it really shows, like from book 1 to book 2, like just sort of like the flow of the story and the quality of the prose. I think it shows that I had a lot more input for book 2 than I did book 1. Which brings us to number 4. It's really not a solo effort. I used to wonder why are acknowledgments so long at the back of books. Because you need help. And I know that's not like, there's like, those unicorns out there that like just push out a draft and then it's done. And then they don't really need much help. But also I don't think they re trying to write the great American novel. They re just trying to have a career like book, moving on, next book, moving on. And but it's just like, it's okay to ask for help, even though like, you re going to get shot down, especially if you re like researching and you need to like reach out to someone who is an expert in something, which I didn't do very much in the first book, like hardly at all. But I did a lot in the second book, because especially like for science fiction, it's kind of embarrassing be like, lawyer friend. Mind if you use your degree that you spent many years acquiring, walking through the thought experiment of what giving, I don't know what the legal question of aliens in America might look like. I don't know, just throwing it out there. Beta readers, I had one of me closest friends namesake for the character was me sort of cultural attaché for the second protagonist in the second book. And at first I was like, it doesn't matter. But honestly, like, I cannot imagine what it would have been like now writing this character without, knowing someone really well and being comfortable enough with them to like message them at all hours of the night like, hey, do Persians take their shoes off in the house? The answer is yes. Turns out it's weird that, Anglo-Americans don't. Most Most of the world looks down on us for that. But by that same token, beware of too many cooks. I have definitely seen people with books that especially like if they read kind of early on in their career. You can kind of see where there's a lot of hands on it. So it's kind of a balance. And the only person who can figure out is you. Number 5, this industry is full of jealous bitches. It's like a disease. And I do not consider myself exempt from this. Coming from YouTube, I don't see a lot of gel. Okay, I do see a lot of jealousy, but not like with people I am friends with. There are definitely some jealous haters out there. But like the people I've known and worked with for a lot of years, it's rare that you see like, oh, so-and-so has overtaken me in subs. That means I suck. Or, whoa, I wish I could have done that. Like, I definitely see that. And it always kind of pings me like, 10 red flags when people kind of go into, a semi-collaborative medium with that mindset. But for the most part, I feel like, at least in me little enclave of YouTube, people are pretty good at not seeing other people's successes as reflective of their own failure or lack of success. That is not always true. I have definitely known people who were just pathologically incapable of being happy for other people in the YouTube community. Why can't you just be happy for me and then go home and talk behind my back later like a normal person? Every success someone else had was a reflection of their failure. But for the most part, you don't see that a lot on YouTube. But in publishing, I don't. It's completely different. Everybody is jealous all the time. And everyone is trying so hard to pretend like that is not the case. I think it's because most people know it's kind of wrong to be, I'm sorry, envious. Whereas envy is offensive. It's resentment over what someone else has that you lack. Like everyone kind of knows that what does and does not take off, or who does and does to get published, or who does and does not get X numbers. It isn't really a meritocracy. I would say that's way more true in publishing than in YouTube. Because again, like bestsellers do tend to have a lot of marketing money behind them, or an influencer with a YouTube channel. And again, this doesn't apply to everybody. I definitely know some authors that either we're just so, let's say, confident that they don't experience envy, or they hide it really, really well. Someone can be like a huge bestseller and still struggle with oh, you have the respect of your ex peers, or you have ex fan base, or you have more fan art, or someone with very little sales, but a lot of networking connections. People who are more on the commercial side of things can be like, why don't I get awards nominated? Or why don't I get a lot of attention on Twitter from people within the industry? It's like no matter how successful you are, or well keyed in you are, everyone is jealous of everyone else. And I am no exception. Like I'll see someone like that I know, and I really enjoy and I really support. Like right out the gate, they get a review in the New York Times. And I'm like, so happy for you. I am really happy. And I don't know why this is more in publishing than YouTube. I think part of it is, because those really obvious metrics, like getting a solid recommendation from a peer or a reviewee, a major outlet, are like really obvious signifiers of success, as opposed to like on YouTube, where it's just a numbers game. But also like on YouTube, it's suggested like it's a numbers game in many ways. Like, yeah, you might pull in X many views, and everybody can see it. But also just like, okay, I put out a video onto the next one, onto the next one. You're never going to work on a YouTube video as hard as you would on a novel. I take that back. I know some people who absolutely have worked on YouTube videos as hard as they have, or would have on a novel. And I think the key here is to know this about themselves. And most people do. And push through it. Because I think the only way to healthfully live with envy is to know that's what's going on in your head. And just get over it. Because there is absolutely no harm in being happy for other people. Number 6, you need more practice than you think you do. I mean, that's just basically what it says on the header. I don't know if I need to clarify that. I see way too many people, myself, 6 years ago included that, no, they re not gonna knock it out of the park on the first tree, but kind of hope they will. And I don't really understand where this impulse or expectation from others comes from. In me case, I did see a bunch of people coming in with this expectation that because they respect me work so much on YouTube, I was going to automatically be perfect as a novelist. And I'm like, I have been doing this for 13 years. I have had a long time to kind of refine like me timing and me voice and like the way I construct arguments and the narratives and editing. And also it's nonfiction. It's completely different. Oh, I I expected better from you. And it's like, whenever I see people who just become so obsessed with this idea that their first novel has to be perfect. I get it because people are weirdly judgmental in their expectations of what a debut novel looks like. Like, you don't expect someone's first YouTube video to be on the level with their 20th. Why would you feel the same about a book? And yet people think that way. And I think it's really inhibits people. In hindsight, I wish I had given myself more slack to not be perfect. But I think in general, I think more people need to stop trying to be perfect and just accept it's your first tree. I mean, no book is going to ever be perfect, but your first one, it's still your first one. Cut yourself some slack. Number 7, review bombing. I hoped I was being paranoid. I hoped people would actually do this. But jealous haters, they absolutely did. So when I say review bombing, I don't mean negative reviews. I mean basically, pettily one staring a book because they hate me personally. And I really only started to notice this after someone released a video stating that the only reason I had ever made content criticizing rolling was to promote me own book. And then a bunch of his goblins, sorry fans, then went on to places like Goodreads to, mass, one star the book. And I don't want to make it sound like it was like hundreds of people. It's hundreds of them here on YouTube. Maybe a few dozen on over Goodreads and Amazon. The rationale being that I don't disagree with Rowling because of a specific and would say very highly articulated disagreement I have with her political views, which she has many times unambiguously made clear in public. But because in clout chasing, I am riding the wave of hate to promote me own work, which tells you an awful lot about how Carl thinks. So yeah, the point of review bombing is definitely to bring down the property value of your brand, but mostly it's just to hurt you. It's just to be cruel, be catty. And I don't want to make it sound like it was just Carl and his followers. There was definitely some review bombing after the incident in March, where for a month it was popular on lefty Twitter to, go after me. Weird how they got over that. It's weird. It's weird how I don't get threatening messages from those people anymore. You real flops. I am the Earth Mother and you are all flops. The review bombing on the first book did really surprise me. What did surprise me is that they kept doing it into the second book. Like arguably there was more review bombing on the second book than there was on the first. And that really did surprise me because I kind of figured that like the first one was going to be emblematic of like all of the stuff that unfairly accrued that I didn't deserve. And then by book 2, they would have gotten bored and moved on. But hang on me face. So and so the result of this. I don't want to imply that like it's knocked like an entire star off me cumulative, Goodreads score or Amazon score. It might have affected it a little bit, but probably it hasn't. But again, like this isn't meant to really change the consumer's mind because if someone leaves a 1-star review that like attacks me personally, I think that's not really going to dissuade someone from buying it. But since Carl of Swindon has like literally just uploaded another video about mine, like right before I started recording this, I guess his not at all creepy obsession with me is he's trying to get me attention. So let me just address that. Carl, I'm married. I am flattered, and I get that you've been trying really, really hard to get me attention, for obvious reasons. But again, I'm married. I don't think it would really work out between us. Honestly, you read a little old form, me. But again, I'm flattered. And I really, really, really hope that Joanie gives you the attention that you are so desperately, desperately craving. Really, and as for Carl's fans, I'm very, very sorry. I called you goblins. You not goblins. You trash pandas. Number 8, imposter syndrome. It's funny because I can say like I still experience envy, but I don't have imposter syndrome anywhere near on the level than I did like a year ago, or even 6 months ago. And I don't really know why, because it was like for the first few months, like any positive feedback would just bounce right off me and any negative feedback was like, whatever hurts is true. I'm garbage. I'm a terrible writer. Everyone who's saying something nice is lying to him. And all of the mean things are the true thing. And then I just kind of got over it. I don't like again, like I don't mean this to be a humble brag, but I think part of it definitely was like, making it on a few best of the year lists and then being nominated for a few awards and still nominated for an award. Just glad to be nominated. Thank you. I know that comes across as a humble brag. But the truth is that honestly, like validation from institutions did kind of help them, get over it. But honestly, thing that really made me get over it was like finishing the second book and just kind of like feeling secure unto myself. Like it was like, I know some people aren't going to like the direction that I went with it, especially people who liked the first book. The tone is very different. The characters are pretty different. I've seen people compare it to Uncut Gems. Holy shit, I'm gonna have them. I think it's like people say it's a lot darker, but I also think it's a lot funnier. I think it's both. I think it's a better book all around. And I've seen people already who do not agree. But where a year ago, the imposter syndrome would be like, oh yes, clearly I am trash. Now I'm like, whatever. They re-entitled to their opinion. I disagree with them. I disagree. And I think the truth is like, I don't really feel imposter syndrome on YouTube either. Like whenever people are mean on YouTube, like I can either disagree with them or see their points. Like, I've seen people be like, I can't stand your effect. I can't stand like this, so like wine mom above it all. I am so tired of everything. Sorry. I am like, well, yeah, that is me brand. And if that doesn't interest you, then I can totally see why you don't like me channel. But the thing about imposter syndrome is I do think external validation can help, but that can't fix it. I think the only thing that can fix it is knowing what you read about and just kind of creating a product that you feel secure in. And if you do that, then it won't be miserable. Because as long as you read just like, doused in imposter syndrome, then it's just not gonna be fun. And like, what is the point of all this if like, you re not having a little bit of fun? Number 8. Goodreads is garbage. And by garbage, I mean, don't go on Goodreads. Like, here's the thing. Goodreads is not for authors. It is not for you. It is for readers. And so unless it's like a quand or something, this is a conversation that you were not invited to. No, because people have the right to have their extremely hyperbolic opinions in one direction or the other, and without you like getting involved with them. And because it's really easy to get obsessed with. And I learned really early on, like before the first book even came out, like when it was still in like the arc phase, that I'm just like, look, for my own mental health, I have to stay off Goodreads. So stay off Goodreads. Anyway, I think it did a really good job at not making this a downer. Glad we still have Corona. Oh, sad. So anyway, in the case, the paperback of Axioms and is out now. In the book, it's been out. But they just released the hardcover in the book, just to make things extra confusing. For truth of the divine, the hardcover will be in both the Gus and the book at the same time. And for all you furners out there, maybe one day someone will buy some foreign language rights. Again, I have no power over that at all. No, you cannot translate it. Publisher has to buy it first, then you can translate it. You can work for them. Good luck out there, all you aspiring novelists. You